Well, hello, Henry. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. We are so excited, and I know that my guests, as they get to know you, will be so excited for the information that you plan to share today. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Can you please tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I always like to just first say thank you so much, Ebonice, for reaching out and allowing me the opportunity to be of service and to tell my story. I'm hopeful that I'll be able to help somebody. And I certainly know, too, every time I get a chance to tell my story, it gives me an opportunity to help myself. So um, I always like to, you know, start off too with just claiming that I'm a father and I'm a husband. I think first and foremost, I've got three wonderful children, beautiful kids, and a beautiful wife that I'm grateful for. And I think without their love and without their unwavering support, I certainly wouldn't be able to do all of the wonderful things that I'm involved in today. So, by trade, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and licensed clinical alcohol drug counselor. I'm also a certified psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. I'm currently owner of Louisville Health and Healing, which is an outpatient mental health practice in Louisville, Kentucky. We have over 20 different providers, and we provide therapy and counseling for teens, children, and adults. And I'm also the CEO at Kentucky Harm Reduction Coalition, and we provide harm reduction services throughout the state of Kentucky. And I'm also working on a documentary right now as well. So it's a little bit
Oh,
about,
really? Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, it's a little bit about me and kind of what
Yeah,
I'm
listen,
doing.
I didn't know that part. I think that's going to be really cool. I cannot wait for that to come out because I feel like that we're still fairly new of knowing each other. So I think
Yeah.
just kind of understanding what all you do and how many hats you wear is pretty interesting. Um, just to let my audience know, we kind of cross paths because we both serve on the board for a nonprofit called Prodigal Ministries. And when you first came on, like people were kind of telling me a little bit about your story, and I was like, oh, that sounds good. It's like good, like gumbo, right? It's always just awesome just to hear a really good story. So I couldn't wait to ask you to like come on the podcast so that you could tell your story because I know that it will definitely bless someone. So let's
Yeah.
just kind of let's scroll back a little bit and let's just talk about where it all started. So if you can kind of just start from that point, just what led you up to um, getting your degree, starting your business.
I think the 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 thing that I identify maybe the most with in my life, and the most pivotal moment in my life is when I made the decision to go to treatment for an opiate, not just opiate, for drug dependency. And I am a survivor of the opioid
Mm-hmm.
crisis. In December of this year will be 16 years of being in recovery. And although recovery looks different for me,
Hold on. Can we stop just for a second and say that that's phenomenal?
yeah,
16 years, right? I know, I will say, I know a lot of people that struggle with substance abuse, and 16 years is nothing just shy to just, kind of roll it off your tongue because there's a lot of work that goes into that. So kudos to you.
yeah. I think the challenging part of that isn't the life I live today. The life that I live today it supports me in being, this version of myself. I was 24 years old when I decided to go to treatment. Life had been falling down all around. At this particular time of my life, I was using, $300 worth of OxyContin a day. I was drinking alcohol and smoking weed every day. And, I had been using drugs and like that, and been using substances at that point for about 12 years. I think the first time that I used a substance, I was about 12 years old. And growing up in the way that I grew up, and how I grew up, yeah, you wanted to ask something?
Do you mind sharing like how you? I'm sorry. Yeah. Do you mind sharing like how you were introduced to, alcohol and drugs at such a young age?
Well, it was certainly a part of my family. Drinking,
Mm-hmm.
had been a norm in my family, in my extended family, and um, with my father. Um, I can remember being, a young child, and we would be at a family party, and the adults would be playing cards, and people would be smoking cigarettes, and there was always this funny smelling smoke that was in there, and when I got older, I realized what that was, and I would sit back and I would see these people that I looked up to, like my uncles, and I would see them acting a fool, and I would see them being loud and rowdy, and I admired that. I romanticized that, and I didn't know, at the time what I was romanticizing. But I knew that it was what I wanted to be, and what I wanted to do, and how I wanted to, feel. And so, when I got the opportunity, to smoke weed for the first time, it was a childhood friend of mine who had gotten it from his parents, and we didn't know what we were doing, and we did it
Mm-hmm.
anyways. And I'm not really sure if it did anything, that first time, but it did plant the seed that this is cool, and I like this. And some time passed. I mean, I didn't immediately, smoke marijuana the very next day. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
some time passed, but what happened was my mind held on to that experience as pleasurable and fun, you know. And there were certainly a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times of most of my life, probably until I got sober in 2008, was undesirable. Um, my parents got divorced when I was about 4 years old. My mom did the best she could to raise my sister and I, and it was tough. It was tough. There was a lot of heartache. Um, there was just a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulty. Growing up, and different levels of abuse that I endured, that my sister endured. And so I think that I had always been sort of waiting for my moment to get out. And that was through using drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that. And not only the escape or the relief from using like drugs and alcohol, but I was able to make connections and relationships with other young people, other teenagers, friends. So there was this connection part that was just kind of woven into it, as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, for me and the family that I was a part of, and the neighborhoods that I grew up in, and if one substance is available, it's just several degrees of distance before there are other substances that made their way into my circle. And so it was nothing for
Mm-hmm.
me at 15 to use cocaine or to use methamphetamine. Um, I used OxyContin for the first time, like I said, when I was 14. Alcohol and nicotine. Nicotine was probably, not probably, nicotine was the first drug that I used. Um, I was 5 years
Hmm.
old. The first time that I tried a cigarette, I was 5 years old. I got in a lot of trouble and didn't try to smoke a cigarette for many years after that. But certainly, as I got into pre-teenage years, that was really the thing. Was smoking, stealing cigarettes and smoking cigarettes. The rush of getting
Do you
away.
feel like because easy to get? Do you feel like it was because it was easy to obtain? Did the cigarettes were the
It,
first thing that you were able to get your hands on?
it is, and being an expert in the field now, like I can look back and I can see, um, accessibility is important. You know, the family's
Hmm.
attitudes about substances and about alcohol use. That's really important. Um, Growing up in a chaotic, abusive environment, the age of first use, we know that the earlier someone experiments with um, drugs and alcohol, the greater likelihood that they'll develop dependency into adolescence and early adulthood. And I didn't know any of this stuff at the time. I was using to self medicate. I had some undiagnosed mental health disorders that weren't diagnosed until probably 10 years ago. You know, um, so there was a lot that was going on, and unfortunately, I lived in a time, and I lived in a place, and I lived with people where like health and wellness and secure attachment and healthy relationships could not be a priority. They could not be more important than what the status quo was.
I think that's everyone's prayer. I will tell you that I came from a family of addictions. My mom, she struggled with alcohol addiction, and for a certain period of time, she also struggled with substance abuse. Um, and then my dad, he's always struggled with that as far as I can look back. He will be sober for a while, and then it's like a cycle. And I knew that I did not want to be consumed in that situation. So I wanted a change. And I remember at the age of 18, it's so funny because when God is pulling for you and you're open to whatever God wants, you don't know what the vehicle is that he'll use, right? It's different for everyone. And I remember like being at home and just praying and asking God, you have to help me because I don't want to be in a situation that's not conducive to help my future. And I want you in my life. Like that was like a bigger, conversation, of course. And there was a preacher that came on the screen on, and I'm watching, church online, and he said, if you just touch the screen, we're gonna pray. And so I put my hands on the screen, and now I chuckle at it, but back then that was so powerful for me. That was me saying, Lord, I surrender myself. I was at a broken place in my life. And so I can only imagine where you were when you said, Lord, I surrender myself to you, right? When he was able to show himself to you. That's phenomenal.